Hello my friends, welcome to today's video on antimicrobial resistance. Today we will be looking at what are antimicrobials, what is antimicrobial resistance, what is the problem, and what can we do to fight it. Let's get into it. But what is an antimicrobial? An antimicrobial is an agent that kills microorganisms or stops their growth. An antibiotic is just an antimicrobial that targets bacteria. Now, the first antibiotic was discovered in 1928 by Alexander Fleming. He discovered penicillin, the drug, actually quite accidentally. Such an accidental discovery is known as serendipity, the faculty or phenomenon of finding valuable or agreeable things not sought for. He discovered it by leaving the bacteria he was looking at, a staphylococcus I believe, in a petri dish and leaving it overnight to culture. When he arrived the next morning, he found that a fungus had grown on top of one of the bacteria petri dishes and had prevented their growth. He realized that he could take this sample and use it to combat diseases like pneumonia and scarlet fever. It is estimated that Fleming's work has saved about 80 to 200 million lives ever since his discovery, and penicillin is saving lives to this very day. While he ended up saving those many lives, he also introduced the world to a new problem, the problem of antimicrobial resistance. But what is antimicrobial resistance? Antimicrobial resistance happens when microbes change and become resistant to the antibiotics that are used to treat the bacteria that cause these infections. The development of resistance in microbes occurs during the exposure to antimicrobial drugs, and it is actually a normal phenomenon. It is just a normal evolution that a bacteria will try to evolve to overcome this danger of a drug. It happens in 4 steps as outlined by the CDC in this diagram. First, there are a lot of germs and a few happen to be resistant to the antibiotic that is being used. Second, when the antibiotics kill the bacteria that cause the illness, they also kill the good bacteria that we have in our system, some ones that help us digest or perform other important functions. Now, in the third step, when all of this is done, when the antibiotic has been used and done its job, all the good bacteria and bad bacteria are killed except the ones that have now developed resistance to this bacteria, to this antibiotic. Now, these antibiotic bacteria have an empty playground where they have no competition for resources as everyone else is wiped out. Now, the use of drugs becomes pointless because they can just circumvent these and now have an open playground to replicate and cause more damage. Some of these bacteria actually give off their resistant genes to other bacteria and share them so that everyone can survive and do damage to the host. Resistance to drugs can occur not only in bacteria but also in viruses, fungi, and all kinds of parasitic organisms or microorganisms. Now, why is the occurrence of resistance in bacteria and other microorganisms such a big problem? Well, in the last decades, we humans have been using more and more antibiotics. And beyond just using more antibiotics, more people are now using more antibiotics. As people in poorer countries are now getting wealthier, they now can afford access to medication. And the increased use of antibiotics makes the occurrence of AMR much higher and thus much more dangerous. But we don't just use antibiotics in human medicine, we also use it in the environment, in plants and crops, and even in the production of meat. For more information on this, check out last week's video on the benefits of vegetarianism. A 2014 report by Lord Jim O'Neill on the Antimicrobial Resistance Review found that by 2050, if AMR is left unchecked, it could kill 10 million people every year. This is more than even the 8.2 million deaths that are estimated due to cancer. And that's a lot, especially considering that these deaths will be coming from diseases that we have already cured, but just can't cure because we have used the antibiotics too much. Beyond killing 10 million people every single year, AMR also makes lives much more complicated for those who are living. Simple medical procedures that rely on antibiotics, such as surgeries, organ transplants, C-sections, or chemotherapies, joint replacements, can all become much more dangerous because the antibiotics that are used in these procedures could now no longer work. Beyond that, AMR also threatens to undo the progress that we have done in the last century, be it the 50-fold decrease in maternal deaths, or the progress that we have done in our fight against HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. All of this demonstrates how widespread the problem of AMR is. This isn't just specific to one country, one continent, or one region. This affects every country, irrespective of how poor or rich they are. This affects every one of us equally. Now, beyond just wreaking havoc on lives and the healthcare system, AMR's side effects include the economy, which could lose up to $8 trillion annually. $8 trillion annually by 2050. And we have seen how bad the economy can become due to a health scare like COVID-19 or SARS. Now imagine if you scale up the 1 million deaths that we have experienced due to COVID-19 up to 10 million that we expect from AMR. It's just unthinkable. Currently, about 700,000 people die every year due to diseases that are resistant to drugs that are used to treat them. These are 700,000 deaths already this year, annually, that we are experiencing. 700,000 deaths, 700,000 people that we lose to diseases that we can already cure, but that we have just lost the effectiveness of our antibiotics. This is a serious problem, but how do we combat it, or what is being done against it? So what is being done against AMR? Well, many countries have now realized how important this situation is, how urgent the fight against AMR is. And so in 2015, the World Health Organization released a global action plan on AMR, where they released a kind of guideline on which countries can individually create a national action plan on how they will combat AMR. So far, out of 159 countries, 116 countries have developed a national AMR action plan, and another 36 countries have one in the works, which is good news that many countries are taking this seriously and are working together, because as we have seen with COVID-19, health crises are not of national importance, they're of global importance. So it's really important that everybody steps in to fight this. But how do we join in this fight? How do me and you, how do we combat it? We are not the WHO, we are not countries, we are just everyday people. Do we just give up and go on about our days? There are, in fact, 3 things that we can do in our everyday lives to make sure that we are doing our part in combating antimicrobial resistance. The first one is awareness. Every problem solution starts with being aware of the problem. Share this video, share other internet resources that you'll find on my blog post with your friends and family. Let them know, what is this problem? Make sure they are aware of this problem so that everyone can tackle it. The more people are aware of it, the more importance we give to such a big threat, the more likely we are to come up with solutions, and the more likely we are to defeat this disease together. Second, care. Be careful when you use antimicrobials. The best way to go about this is to really only use drugs if you absolutely need them. Make sure that before using drugs that A, they are still valid and have not expired. This has happened to me actually, and it's not that fun. And second, make sure that, or B, not A and 2, make sure that you're only taking these antibiotics with a proper prescription. So if it's a minor headache, what I sometimes find is that I sometimes get headaches because I haven't drunk enough water, maybe I was staring at the screen too much, or I didn't get enough sleep. I usually just try to push out as much as I can, but if it doesn't get better, I just drink a lot of water, take a walk, get some fresh air, and somewhere I just go to bed and kind of give up for the day and live to fight the next day. But I generally try to use antibiotics only if they are absolutely necessary. And the third thing that we can do to combat AMR is choice. So beyond not using antibiotics ourselves, we can make sure that we choose things that don't contain antibiotics. One of the biggest examples, as mentioned before, is meat. So in the production of meat, to keep up with the increased demand for meat today, companies are increasingly relying on so-called CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. And these CAFOs are basically a big hall filled with animals to the point where these animals can't move anymore. They are then just fed and slaughtered. And since they're cramped so tightly, it is an ideal breeding ground for not just microbes but also resistant microbes. And what happens here is, to avoid infections, they are not just fed a lot of food, they're also given a lot of antibiotics. And these antibiotics stay in the meat, and when you buy them and eat them, you're essentially also eating antibiotics, which is crazy since you paid and bought the meat, not the antibiotics that can come along with it. So what can you do against it? One, you could try to be a bit more vegetarian. For some tips on how to be a bit more vegetarian in your daily life, check out last week's video. Or try to buy meat that isn't sourced through CAFOs, that is maybe created by your small local farm, that where you know that the animals have enough space to run around, where antibiotics aren't being used against them. It's just a win-win-win situation. And that's it for today's video. Thanks a lot for watching and tuning in. Stay safe and much love.